Doctor. Orisha had always believed that silence was safer than speaking her heart. She had spent years building walls around herself. Strong, cold, unbreakable walls that protected her from pain but also kept love out. She was the kind of doctor who entered a room with calm confidence, who spoke softly but decisively, and whose eyes held stories she never shared. Patients trusted her instantly, colleagues respected her deeply, but no one ever got close enough to see the quiet ache she carried inside. Her life was simple. Hospital, home, a cup of tea in the evening, and lonely nights where memories returned uninvited. Once, long ago, she had loved someone deeply. But love had slipped away without explanation, leaving behind an emptiness she had never been able to fill. Since then, she lived only for her work, convincing herself that healing others was enough. Things changed on the evening drive. Mahek arrived. Mahek was a new senior resident, bright, warm, and kind in ways that felt almost unreal. Her laugh carried a softness that made even the most exhausted nurses smile. Her presence brought warmth to the coldest shifts, and she treated every patient as if they were her own family. Yet behind her kindness was something else, a tiredness in her eyes, a heaviness she tried to hide behind cheerful words. The first time they worked together was during a hectic emergency shift. A young woman had been brought in after a severe accident, and both doctors moved quickly, silently, and effortlessly like they had known each other for years. Orisha noticed the steadiness of Mahek's hands, the way she whispered reassurance to the patient even when the situation was critical. Mahek noticed the quiet strength in Orisha's voice, how she asked for instruments without raising her tone, how she stayed calm even when everything around them felt chaotic. After the patient was stabilized and taken to surgery, they found themselves alone in the hallway, breaths heavy from the intensity of the moment. Mahek offered a small smile, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You're incredible," she said softly. Orisha blinked, surprised. Compliments were rare for her, and she never knew how to respond. "I just did my part," she murmured. Mahek shook her head gently. "No, you did more than that. You made her feel safe. Not everyone can do that." Something warm stirred in Orisha's chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Before she could think of a reply, a nurse interrupted them, and the moment passed like a whisper carried away by a breeze. Days turned into weeks. Their shifts often aligned, and with each passing day, their bond grew in small but meaningful ways. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was in shared tea breaks when the hospital lights felt too harsh. It was in the way Mahek would quietly place a cup of warm chai beside Orisha after a long surgery, without asking if she wanted one. It was in the way Orisha began looking forward to mornings she used to dread, hoping she might see Mahek's bright smile waiting at the nurse's station. One night, during a long 24-hour shift, the hospital felt unusually quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows, patients were asleep, and the corridors were dimly lit. Mahek found Orisha sitting alone in the staff lounge, staring into her tea with an expression that looked heavier than usual. "You look tired," Mahek said gently, taking a seat beside her. "I'm always tired," Orisha replied, attempting a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mahek didn't push. She simply sat beside her, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. Minutes passed in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like two souls resting. After a while, Mahek spoke quietly. "Can I tell you something?" Orisha nodded. "People always think I'm strong," Mahek said, staring at her hands. "But I'm not. I'm scared most of the time. I've lost people too, people I didn't know how to let go of." Orisha turned toward her, surprised. She had always assumed Mahek was made of light, untouched by the darker parts of life. "I hide it," Mahek continued. "Because if I don't, everything else might fall apart." Orisha's heart tightened. She understood that feeling too well. "You don't have to hide with me," she said softly, not fully realizing how vulnerable her own words were. Mahek looked up, eyes warm and slightly watery. "Then maybe you don't have to hide with me either." Those words settled between them like a gentle truth, simple, soft, undeniable. From that night onward, something began to change. Orisha found herself talking more. Sometimes about her day, sometimes about her fears, sometimes about the past she thought she had buried forever. Mahek listened with a patience that felt like healing. And Mahek shared too, Stories of heartbreak, of dreams she had once chased, of nights she cried herself to sleep but still showed up each morning with a smile. They became each other's quiet place. Their connection grew in stolen moments. A shared umbrella on a rainy morning. A soft touch on the arm during a difficult procedure. A lingering glance after a long shift. A smile across the hallway that made everything else fade away. There was no rush, no pressure, no dramatic confession. Their love grew like dawn. Slow, gentle, impossible to ignore. One evening, after a particularly emotional case, Mehak found Arisha standing alone on the hospital rooftop. The city lights flickered below, and the wind carried a chill. Arisha's eyes were distant, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" Mehak asked softly. "No," Arisha whispered, voice trembling. "I lost a patient today, someone I really tried to save." Mehak stepped closer. "You did everything you could." "It wasn't enough," Arisha said, her voice cracking. Without hesitation, Mehak reached out and took her hand. Arisha flinched slightly at the unexpected warmth, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she let herself lean into it. "You're human," Mehak whispered. "And you care deeply. That's not a weakness." Arisha bowed her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. For years she had cried alone. But this time, she felt safe enough to let someone witness her pain. Mehak wrapped her arms around her gently, not to fix anything, not to give answers, but simply to be there. And for Arisha, that was enough. More than enough. Over time, their bond became something even deeper than either of them had expected. They laughed more. They stayed late after shifts, talking about dreams instead of fears. They walked home together, even if one lived blocks away in the opposite direction. The small distances became excuses to stay close. One night, while sitting together at the hospital garden, Arisha looked at Mehak with an expression full of quiet wonder. "You changed me," she said softly. Mehak smiled gently. "No, Arisha, you healed yourself. I was just beside you." "Then stay beside me," Arisha whispered before she could stop herself. Mehak reached over, brushing a strand of hair behind Arisha's ear. "I've been here from the beginning." Their fingers intertwined, hands warm against the cool night air. There were no grand declarations, no loud promises, just two hearts finding a home in each other after years of searching. Love didn't come loudly for them. It arrived like a soft breeze, like a gentle sunrise, like a hand reaching out in the dark and finding another hand waiting. Together, they learned that healing wasn't always about medicine. Sometimes, healing was about being seen, being understood, being held, being loved, quietly, kindly, honestly. In the silent hallways of the hospital, two doctors, two women who once believed their hearts were beyond repair, found a love that didn't demand perfection.